Hanukkah. It's Shirley with the Spirit of Matter episode, a classic Spirit of Matter, where I take a chart of a thinker and I read about the person and I make prediction about what their chart is going to look like, and then I take a look at the chart, see what predictions were right, what were wrong, and I delineate the chart. So this is Martin Heidegger. The sun the sun ingressed into Capricorn, which is Saturn ruled, and I have Saturn in the ninth house. So to me, it's philosophical teachings and philosophers, and this is classic physics, Spirit of Matter episode. It's the third episode that I'm recording today, and the second Spirit of Matter classic episode. So I've been talking for 5 to 6 hours. And I'm beginning with yet another one because I have the desire to do another one. Let's begin. Oh, for those of you who like my channel, who like my content, you can subscribe to me if you want to contribute and feed me, so that I remain a good civil person, and be a contributing part to society. Then I have a Patreon, and that's where I can be, you can donate money, and I will put the link somewhere. You can write in the comments below, and I will put the link. You can find me on Instagram, Shirley Youngblood, on Twitter. I have the Talishare account, which I'm probably going to look into, and I have another account, it's Shirley Tally, a Real Dreamer, and I have a couple of YouTube channels that I'm making experiments with. So Jupiter Rising Shirley, Shirley Tally, a Real Dreamer, and I think Shirley Tally Youngwood Holmes was the latest experiment that I did with the closure of the moon when when Jupiter entered Aries. Martin Heidegger was born in 1889, 26th of September. I think this is already a Libra sun, so that's Libra sun. We also already know that. 1889. What Pluto generation was that? I don't know. 26 May 1976, German philosopher, is best known for his contributions to phenomenology, hermeneutics, and existentialism. Among the most important and influential philosophers of the 20th century, was criticized for supporting Nazi party as a rector to University of Freiburg. Ooh, juicy stuff. In 1933, and there was a controversy about the relationship between his philosophy and Nazism. Oh, that is interesting. So, Meskirch Baden, was born in Baden, died in Baden-Württemberg. Um, uh, Studied in the University of Freiburg. It's in Baden-Württemberg. Um, Partners 20th century. So his schools, so phenomenology, hermeneutics, ontological hermeneutics, um, transcendental hermeneutics, existentialism, existential phenomenology. So studied in Marburg and Freiburg. Thesis, die Lehre vom Urteil und Psychologismus. Okay. Ein theoretischer Beitrag zur Logik, Doctrine of Judgment in Psychologism and Critical Theory, Contribution to Logic, die Kategorien und Bedeutungslehre des Duns Scotus Doctrine of Categories and Meaning. Um, so his advisor was Arthur Schneider and Heinrich Rickert. Um, Philosophy. Students Hans Jonas. On Christian philosophy, metaphysics, art, Greek philosophy, techno- technology. This one will be interesting for me. Language, poetry, and thinking. Okay. Noble, noble ideas. Heideggerian terminology, Dasein, Gestell, ontotheology, ontological difference, existentialism, existentials, existentialien, ecstasy, zygetics, hermeneutic article. I think the zygetics also relates to something to do with Nazism. Uh, aletheia, disclosure, fundamental ontology, forgetfulness of being, sein Vergessenheit. Hmm. Dwelling, wohnen, language as the vehicle through which the question of being can be unfolded. Again, this is, continuing the card, or dialectically continuing the card. Language speaks, so it's very big importance on language. But this was an era. I think it's Pluto Gemini. The power of language, Pluto Gemini, I think. Our ability to send a strife between world and earth. Okay, so this have like a dystopian view of arts. Maybe Saturn, Neptune, something. Influencers. Anaximander, Aquinas, Aristotle, Bonaventure, Brentano, Dilthey, Thomas of Erfurt, Hartmann, Hegel, Heraclitus, Husserl, Jaspers Kant, Kierkegaard, Lucy, Lask, Nietzsche, Parmenides, Plato, Richard Dune Scouts, Jacob Jones von Uxel, and Count York. And he influenced Ardent, Argamen de Beauvoir, and the existentialists that we know, Derrida, Dreyfus, Boltzmann, Cavell, Duquesne, El Bizri, I don't know who he is, Ferreira, Foucault, so relativism as well, Habermas, which is the next stop, Hermann Jaspers, Jonas, Cookie, Levinas, Lord Marcel, people that I don't know, Nancy, Nürnberg, Schultz, Patuszka, Ranner, Sartre. Sartre was existentialism. Could he be called like? Did he also have to do with structuralism? I'm not sure. Strauss, Steiger, Zubri, Sloterdijk, Sherman. I need to read. Political party, the Nazi. So we have an interesting person. Hopefully, we are safe to do about this without that encouraging Nazi ideas within people. So, in Heidegger's fundamental being and time, Dasein is included as a term for the type of being that human possess. Dasein has been translated as being there. Heidegger believes it already has a pre-ontological and non-abstract understanding that shapes how it lives. This is being in the world. Okay, if you read my post and were like, "What's this Dasein?" then that was that. The unitary concepts at odds with rationalistic philosophy and subject-object view, since at least René Descartes. So he was revolutionizing ideas that were residing from René Descartes relating to subject-object relations. And think about psychology as well and subject-object psychology. Heidegger explicitly disagrees with Descartes and uses an analysis of Dasein to approach the question of meaning and being. The meaning is concerned with what makes beings intelligible as beings. According to Heidegger scholar Michael Willer, or Michael Willer, I don't know. Biography, yes, biography. Early years. This is where he's born, a German village. We grew up in Meßkirch, Baden, the son of Johanna Kempf and Friedrich Heidegger. Raised in Roman Catholic. Why does Kempf isn't like, it doesn't, it's not a Catholic name, but okay. I think so. Raised in Roman Catholic, he was the son of the sexton of the village church that adhered to the First Vatican Council in 1870, observed mainly by the poorer class of Meßkirch, so he grew up to a lower class. His family could not afford to send him to university, so entered Jesuit seminary, where he was turned away within weeks because of the health requirements and what the director and doctor in the seminary described as psychosomatic heart condition. Ooh, that's interesting. So already, heart condition, heart, soul, sun, okay? So it can be like, you can be like a Pisces ascendant with Leo in the 6th and the sun in the 12th, like a sun in, but no, but the sun is, no, of course the sun isn't falling Libra, but still not enough for me. Psychosomatic. So this can be that the Libra is the 12th house, spirit and matter. And I look his health condition as also something to do with his cognition. It's like dealing with the medical condition that involves spirit and matter. Calls for a different. You cannot have a psychosomatic ailment. I love this episode already. You cannot have a psychosomatic ailment and be a courtesan. Like, do you get to why am I saying that? You cannot have a courtesan. And this goes back to my thesis that was never written, by the way. I did the thesis proposal and then went to aromatherapy. So the courtesan dualism basically means that the mind does not affect the body and the body does not affect the mind. So if you have a psychosomatic heart condition, this is beautiful because the interaction of philosophy of medicine, I don't know if I told the story, but when I came to my instructor, it was an MD with philosophy of science. I came with the theoretical framework of Feyerabend, which I did an episode about in Early Spirit of Matter, 2021. And he told me, listen, as an MD, when I read Feyerabend, I don't know how to treat a patient. And so my whole thesis revolutions and the political context or colonial context of the rumors of science, like psychiatry being the rumor of a science before it formed into formalistic cult-like science, but also bearing results. Like we can't ignore mental health, nor should we. Sentence where the philosophy of science, and ontology is also philosophy of science, okay? It's not just phenomenology. Comes into contact with an applied science, then we have something interesting. So for Heidegger, if he suffered, he was refused from his, was diagnosed With the psychosomatic heart condition, then he like the being and the body are one. Okay. Of course, today we can say, oh, non-dualistic relationship between the spirit and matter, or body and matter, and so on and so forth. Body and mind, body-mind, the body-mind question. But it's obvious to me that he could no longer think about ontology as the Cartesian um, if we would talk about the mind, body-mind question, the Cartesian notion of dualism could no longer sustain when he encountered an applied science that does not practice it. And so, astrologically, his health has to do with his worldview, and his health has to do with both his sixth and 12th house. So, if Libra is the 12th, that would make Aries the sixth. If a Libra, and vice versa. If a Libra is the sixth, that would make Aries the 12th. And, and the ruler of the fifth and the sixth, they can either conjunct, the 12th and the sixth can either conjunct. So, or, let's say, I think it was Pluto, either Pluto Gemini. Was it Pluto Gemini? Probably with the years, it's probably Pluto Gemini. Um, which is, Pluto Gemini, the power of language, looking into language, the language and its effect on psychology, the interaction between language and psychology. If Pluto Aquarius is going to be wavelengths of psychology or the psychological biases on science, then uh, Pluto Gemini language, the role of language in psychology. Okay. Pluto Aquarius probably is going to be the role of wavelengths in psychology and mental health. And like I think, I don't know if it was Austin or Chris that alluded to something related to that. I don't remember. Anyway, but this is a big one. I'm trying, like, that's something I'll definitely delineate something from. So, Heidegger was short and sinewy, with dark, piercing eyes. Enjoyed. I don't do astrology of appearance, so I can't delineate from that. He enjoyed outdoor pursuits, being especially proficient in skiing. Ooh, skiing, mountains, like skiing. Feet on the mountain slopes. It can be like Saturn in Pisces in the first, because, the feet on the snowy mountains. Or, but, sportive activity is to do with Mars. It can be, it can even be Mars in Capricorn. When I think about it, you can have a Mars in Capricorn. Um, he studied theology in the University of Freiburg, while supported by the church. Later switched his field of study to philosophy. Um, mm, 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 to ninth house, classic Jupiterian stuff. Completed his doctoral thesis in psychologism in 1914, influenced by neo-theism and neo-Cartesianism, directed by Arthur Schneider. Now, I would have to stop here What is Neo-Cartesianism? 18th century philosophy of human. Kantianism! Das stimmt. Okay. Neo-Kantianism talked about the thing in itself and moral philosophy. Yeah. So the thing in itself and the being. Um, he finished again. Kantianism is to do with oneness. So Kantianism was not in alignment with dualism. If I'm not mistaken, I don't remember his philosophy. I don't remember his philosophy of body mind, if he addressed body mind. So I don't know. No, I did sexual philosophy, moral philosophy, cognition philosophy in terms of the existence, but that I don't know if he probably did body mind, but I don't remember what he did about body mind. Um, in okay, Vanya Legendi with habilitation thesis of Dune Scouts, directed by neo-Kantian Heinrich Rickard and influenced by Edmund Husserl's phenomenology. Um, the years following, he worked as an unsalaried private docent, then served as soldier in the final years of the First World War, serving the last 10 months of the war with the last three of those in meteorological unit in the Western Front. So meteorological unit, already to do with technology. Okay, so it's applied. He encountered applied science, so his philosophy was very much in touch with technology, with how do you actually apply philosophy of mind and philosophy of existence, for example, medicine dealing with a psychosomatic heart condition. He taught a course in the University of Freiburg and published his Gesamthausgabe, I, early Freiburg lecture courses. I don't know what that means. Marburg. 1923, Heidegger was elected to an extraordinary professorship in the University of Marburg. His colleagues included Rudolf Pullman, like, okay, I, the students following on from Aristotle, he began to develop his lectures in the main theme of his philosophy, the question of the sense of being. Extended the concept of subject to the dimension of history and concrete existence. So, no, of course, when I think Aristotle, I think about telos. Something having a telos is something, for example, a seed. The telos of a seed is, if you plant the seed of a tree, is to grow into a tree. Okay, so this is a telos of something. And this is, the ontology. What the seed has a direction. Okay, it's also Martian, it's very linear. So it can be like a Mars ruled ninth house that is um, squaring the sixth, right? The ninth is squaring the sixth. And so, um, let's see if he has a Libra. No, not Libra. He has a Libra sun, but where is that sun? Like, even if he has an Aries sun, Libra in the 12th house, it would still, let's say he has, what would it be for the ninth house then? Libra, that would be a Scorpio rising, and that would make him a Cancer ninth house. Mars in Cancer? Nah. Maybe, I don't know. Um, or the other way around, it would be Mars in Capricorn. I said he probably has Mars in Capricorn. Why did I say that? Saturn ruled Mars, Mars in Capricorn. Ugh, I don't remember. Why did I say that? But that would make him um, ascendant Taurus, and then Mars in Capricorn, Pluto in Gemini, and then yeah. So Capricorn ninth house can be, because this is also, structure of something. But then Mars in the ninth, it would square his sun. So it would give me this, this Mars Sun square, this, heart condition, due to something relating to the way he views his consciousness, okay, psychosomatic. Um, but this is by house, okay? I don't know. We'll see. I don't remember my predictions. So he extends the concept of subject and the dimension of history to concrete existence. But Mars in the ninth house ruled by Saturn would give me telos, because Saturn rules also agriculture and the notion of telos, the analogy, I think Aristotle even used the analogy of a seed that grows into a tree, and the tree has a telos, like it not like there is a structure that it grows into. It's predetermined. If you plant the seeds of a chestnut, you won't get, lemongrass. And this is predetermined. Now, when you get that into the context of the zeitgeist of Pluto and Gemini, you understand the role of language. You also understand the role of language being predetermined. For example, the universal grammar hypothesis of Noam Chomsky relates to the notion that we're not born tabula rasa. There is a structure, tell us, of our linguistic ability that we're born into. Whether that hypothesis is true or not, that's what it's derived from. Um, so he extended the concept of subject to the dimension of history and concrete existence, which he found prefigured in such Christian thinkers as Paul de Tarsus, Augustine of Hippo, Martin Luther, Soren Kierkegaard, and he also read the works of Wilhelm Dilthey, Husserl, Marx, Scheller, and Friedrich Nietzsche. Freiburg. So yeah, I delineated that. 1927, he published his main work, Sein und Zeit, Being and Time. The being, I need to delineate. The being. If it's Sun in the 12th house, then that can be, because the I am is the Sun. If it's Aries in the 12th house, then can also be, because I talked about Aries as the I am today, which is going to be released tomorrow. When Husserl retired as a professor of philosophy in 1928, Heidegger accepted Freiburg's election to be his successor in spite of counter-offer by Marburg. So he remained in Freiburg for the rest of his life, declining later offers, including from Humboldt University of Berlin. Students at Freiburg, Hannah Arendt, Gunther Anders, Hans Jonas, and so on and so forth, like big names, likely attended 4 of his seminars in 4 semesters, and from 1934 to 1936. Now you have to understand this context. Up until 1936, Hitler was already, in his role. And up until 1936, Germany was at a point where they were growing from the First World War. And Hitler could have been, I've previously done an episode about Zizek and his view on Trump and Chomsky criticizing him, saying that what Zizek said about Trump is what people said about Hitler. And not comparing Trump to Hitler, but it is true that when Hitler was elected, people saw him as a pragmatic vote. Okay, it's like he's doing good for Germany. Germany is doing good, relatively good financially, and like this person, if he died, I had a French lecturer who said if Hitler died in 1936, he would be regarded as one of the greatest leaders, greatest counselors in modern times. Okay, Germany had like the correlations of Germany having achievements in his time in recovering from the First World War were prominent. It was not something you could ignore. And he didn't like Jews. Okay? So that was regarded as if you are, if you have studied politics and governance in any way, shape, and form, you've probably been introduced to the joke of you have one leader, one counselor, one president, one prime minister, you know, one of them is a gambler who visits prostitutes. Another has slave trade, like slaves, hire slaves. I don't remember exactly how the joke went. Um, or and her has a love for animals and is vegetarian. Who do you think would be the best president? And then you would have like Churchill, Lincoln, and Hitler. So it didn't like, okay, he had these crazy ideas about everybody has something. And this is something that you need to understand for the context of the times, to get what was the zeitgeist that he was in. Okay. Emmanuel Levinas attended his lectures, courses during his stay in Freiburg, and so on and so forth, deeply influenced by him. He was elected as rector of university in April 1933. So I don't know if we will have houses here. Rector is a very Saturnian role. If it's a Capricorn ninth house, that can be with Saturn in the 10th house, and then his career, what he's known for, and the rector, although what he's known for is also philosopher. Mm, then maybe Jupiter in the 10th house, in the 11th house, and so on and so forth. In April 1993, he joined the Nazi Party. Now we are laughing today on the 1st of May. And I don't know if the 1st of May back then already had the connotations that it had today. During his time as a rector, he was a member and enthusiastic supporter of the Nazi Party, National Socialistic. Um, there's continuing controversy as the relationship between his philosophy and his political alliance to Nazism. So let's see what inspired him. And surprisingly enough, unfortunately, there could have been many things. Maybe he liked what they were doing economically. Okay, maybe he liked certain ideas that they had about, I don't know, connecting with nature, but also advancing technology. Yeah, it was a part of Nazi party ideology. Um, he wanted to position himself as the philosopher of the party. Oh God. But the mighty abstract nature of his work and the opposition of Alfred Rosenberg, who himself aspired to act in that position, limited Heidegger's role. I talked about earlier today in my messy vlog. I talked about Neptune's role in the the kind of the loss that is a fortune. And I think the loss that is a fortune, like I would probably expect Neptune to be involved in that, in him not getting the role. So you could have Neptune in the 10th house or Neptune by the midheaven, because that could be affecting us. Like he didn't get the job, but in retrospective, you know, his withdrawal from his position as rector owed more to his frustration as an administrator than to any principled opposition to the Nazis, according to historians. So he didn't like to take on a Saturnian responsibility. He didn't like administration. He had issues with the Saturn thing. Maybe even Saturn Uranus. I don't know. It can be. Like Saturn Uranus something. What was Uranus? So Uranus was in Taurus back then, wasn't he? And if he had ascendant in Taurus, then that would put Uranus in his with his ascendant, then that could make him a person who is unconventional. But he did but that may find it difficult with Saturnian structures, perhaps. In his inaugural address as a rector, but then he was a rector. So it's just, okay, something interesting. Maybe it was a transit of Saturn that he didn't like to take on. Saturn Neptune. He expressed his support of the German Revolution, and in an article and speech to the students from the same year, he also supported Adolf Hitler. Probably saw him as an aspiring young leader who integrates art and technology and economy and is a good leader in a democratic system, or I don't know what, or something like that. Like, it should probably be something like that. In November 1933, Heidegger signed the vow of allegiance to professor of the German universities in high schools of Adolf Hitler and the National Socialistic State. That happened. Um, he resigned from, now I think it's funny, but back then, you need to understand that it seemed reasonable in this. And of course, he was Heidegger, he was not in any way a Jew. So probably, there was some religious issues between Christianity and Judaism. So, like, you know, equity for Jewish people was not something that he. Also, think about phenomenology and the being is not necessarily like it's from Kantian. It was humanistic, but here it's like, let's delve into what he thought, why he thought what he thought. So he resigned as a rector in 1934, but stayed a member of the Nazi Party until 1945, though the Nazis eventually prevented him from publishing. Okay, what was it that he did that the Nazis didn't like? Um, delivered a series of lectures on Nietzsche in Freiburg, presented much of raw material incorporated in his more established work, thought of time, thoughts from this time and thoughts from this time. So in 1966 interview for the Spiegel, he said everyone who had ears to hear was able to hear in his lectures a confrontation with National Socialism. Okay, so he tries to protect himself. It's like, come on. There was a confrontation with National Socialism. Now, it can be that in the beginning he was a supporter and later he confronted. You must also understand that if You had to be an opportunist. If you did not support the Nazis, then you know where you would be ending. So, but it doesn't seem to be the case. It seemed like there was genuine support from what's written here, or maybe genuine support, and later he got sobered up. But that was, too late for many thinkers. Scholars, however, came to the opposite conclusion about his material. For example, David Farrell Krell, in the introduction of English translation of the seminar, writes, "The problem is not that Heidegger lacked political theory and praxis, but that he had one." So let's see. It's getting more and more interesting. Mm. In the autumn of 1944, Heidegger was drafted into Volkssturm and assigned to dig anti-tank ditches along the Rhine. Heidegger's black notebooks, written between 1931 and the early 70s, first published in 2014, oh, contains several expressions of anti-Semitic sentiments which led to a re-evaluation of Heidegger's relation to Nazism. Okay, again, anti-Semitic sentiments were prevalent. Unfortunately, in many cases, still are till today. Having analyzed the Black Notebooks, Donella T. Cesare asserts in her book Heidegger and the Jews that the metaphysical anti-Semitism. Now, this is interesting. What does metaphysics to do with Jews? What? Because when I think about being in the world and understanding that prior to your thinking about your being, you already exist in the world. Think about the baby. It seems very logical to me. And think about the telos. It's very logical to me. So, how does that correlate with anti Semitism? Antipathy towards Jews was central to Heidegger's philosophical work. You must also remember that Nazis did certain things with ideology, and this is not Heidegger because he supported the Nazis, for, for what it seems, but Nazis did a lot to ideology. Again, it was the battle of ideology, and ideology implied, and there was also a lot of. Think about the swastika. The swastika or the Nazi cross is an inversion of the swastika because the swastika is not only Hindu but is ancient symbol of peace, of healing, and Nazism is an inversion of that. Okay, so I can see how someone who is a philosopher can confuse, but then, if you don't like the Jews, then there is something. But then you also have to read into the text because you can be holding critique of something. For example, um, I have critique about the types of Christianity that holds the idea to Jews and the gods as oh Lord, I am worthy, but the Lord still loves me, and the self-deprecation in the face of the God. I think this is medically problematic because if you devalue yourself and you're used to self-devaluation because of your religious practices, that can yield some very unhealthy relationship patterns. You don't believe in yourself, so you don't, your sovereignty is something that you find difficult to fight for, to argue for, and therefore I really like the Kantian notion of Christianity, and in a way, I guess some segments of Protestant Christianity over some other forms of Catholics, although Catholics have other, pros to them. And so I can criticize Christianity without being, anti-Christian. And so I need to understand, what did he criticize about Judaism? Was it that he just didn't like the Jews and was prejudiced, like, early Voltaire? Or was it that he was criticizing certain things about Judaism, from his knowledge of theology, that you could agree with or disagree with, but did not in themselves yield anti Semitism? So, having analyzed this book, so he held the Holocaust to be the logical result of the Jewish acceleration of technology, and thus blamed the Jewish genocide on its victims themselves. So, victim blaming. Jewish people advanced technology, and then they're the problem. While if you actually look at Nazi ideology, you look and you understand that Nazis, the Nazi Party, was very much idealizing technology as well. Okay, so Jewish people were blamed for Nazism. Literally blamed Jewish people for Nazism. Like, this is so hilarious. This is so hilarious. You know? Okay, this is more than a blind spot, so, like Chiron in the ninth house, what do you say? Harshly aspected Chiron in the ninth house. Post-war, 1946. And it's funny because when I heard about Dasein, I was like, ah, this is so logical. But that. So you have to separate what is true, what is logical, what is useful, and what is, weird. In 1946, France engaged in e- operation, épuration légale in its occupation zone. French military authorities determined that Heidegger should be blocked from teaching or participating in any university activities for his association with the Nazi Party. The denazification procedures against Heidegger continued until March 49, when he was finally pronounced a, a Mitlaufer, the second lowest of five categories of incrimination by association with Nazi regime. No punitive measures against him were proposed. This opened way for his readmission to teaching at Freiburg University in the winter of 1950 and 1951. And I guess this is how we in 2022, 2023 think of Heidegger as one of the greatest, thinkers of that zeitgeist, and a prominent figure that was affected and affected a link between thinkers and philosophers. Uh, Albeit is a very intensely Nazi support, supposedly. He was granted emeritus status and even taught regularly from 1951 to 1958, and by invitation until 1967. So to my question earlier, it's like, oh, was he criticizing something about Judaism, or did he criticize the Jews? No, he criticized the Jews. Okay, he was indeed, like, he had that much of a blind spot, to be very, he was that stupid. Okay, he was that smart and that stupid. As unfortunately the entire humanity is. Um, Including myself, right? I did a post about Eris and Pluto, and I used Dasein and Heidegger, and looked, you see, oh, this is a Nazi supporter, because I was just reading about the Dasein, and I was like, I need to look deeper into Heidegger and review that. Died. Okay, yeah, they don't have how he died. Personal life. Okay, married. Heidegger knew that he was not Hermann's biological father, but raised him as his son. Um, okay, what? Heidegger married in 1917. Okay, Protestant ceremony, presence of her parents. The first son was born in 1919. Okay, Alfred gave birth to Hermann. So he's like their first son was not his biological son, and his biological son was a doctor. And Hermann was told this at the age of 14. Hermann became historian and would later serve as the executor of Heidegger's will. Okay, Hermann Heidegger died in January 2020. Okay, so he had a son outside of marriage. We don't know the reasons. Was it because they couldn't have children? Was it because his wife had an affair? I don't know. And he raised that son as his son. Spent much of his time as vacation at home, at the edge of the Black Forest. Considered seclusion provided by the forest to be the best environment to engage in philosophical thought. So again, the connection with nature and thought, nature and philosophy of nature, natural philosophy. I don't think he did. Well, but if you think about, tell us Aristotle, the natural philosophy soon follows. Looking at nature, um, that can be denoted by Saturn, because Saturn rule agriculture, forest, seclusion. So there can be a connection between the ninth and the 12th rulers. It can be that, Sun in the 12th in Libra, and that would make Aries the ninth and Capricorn the third. But that can be like if he was, let's say, you could have Saturn in Aries, but I don't know, um, a daily seclusion. So it can be Saturn in the third house, or the ruler of the 12th in the third. So seclusion in the forest. Interesting. A few months before his death, he's met a priest. Okay, we don't know about the conversation. What is known is that it included the talk of Heidegger's relationship to the Catholic Church and subsequent Christian burial, at which the priest officiated. Okay, we don't know. Okay, so he knew he was going to die. I don't know, what did he die from? So he had an affair with Hannah Erdet, which was one of his students. Decades-long affair with Elizabeth Blochman. Both women were his students. Ardent was Jewish, and Blochman has one Jewish parent, making them subject to severe persecution by the Nazi authorities. So he's betraying. I don't know if he was betraying, but it's very plausible that he was betraying. He was being very abusive. Okay, because why am I saying abusive? Not because he slept with his students. Okay, I know people that slept with their students and married them. Um, so it's not all abuse. And marriage does not mean lack of abuse, but like had serious intentions. So that doesn't mean necessarily abusive. Um, and not even before due to the power stuff, because like we didn't really have um like we did have awareness from the patronage of the church and patronage of artists, and it's not ethical to do that. But the reason I'm saying abusive is because he was later blaming Jews for the Holocaust. So it's like there is a problem here. There is a problem here. Um, that is beyond the usual power stuff, but also, um, yeah, do you see a theme of victim blaming? Okay, a theme of victim blaming, a philosophical notion of victim blaming, and and that, you know, when you think about age differences and when you think about sleeping with students as something that's chronicle, then how much choice did these students have? Um, you know, we're tempted to think, oh, these were the students that were maybe in love with him and affected by his ideology, so maybe, you know, it was just affairs. Um, but that can also be more stuff. So that puts an emphasis on something to do with sexuality. Um, that here is interesting. Definitely something in here. I think it's more of a Pluto issue. But that Pluto will later be tied to the ninth house or ninth house ruler. So if Aries is the ninth house, that would be Mars. So they can be Pluto Mars. Um, because his ideology, his philosophy, his thinking, and his sexuality were both power abusive. If he blamed the Jews for the Holocaust, um, so there was power abuse in his theosophy, even probably. And then, of course, he didn't protect these women. He didn't protect the women that he slept with from Nazi persecution. So this is intensely abusive, right? And this is also betrayal. Could be even a Sedna issue. The 35-year-old Heidegger, so 35 is Saturn maturation, was married with two young sons, became a long romantic relationship with a 17 years old Ardent. Now, of course, you know, the notion of maturity today, back then, um, but you think about Germany was very Christian. Very, very, very Christian. Sex was something that you do with marriage. You don't have a German word for girlfriend or boyfriend. You only have wife or friend. Mein Freund is also my boyfriend, modernly. Mein Mann is my husband. There is no word for my boyfriend. Mein Freund, mein Freundin, okay? My friend. And this is speaking about language, huh? No words, no words to express the stage in between being friends and being lovers, but only being married. Okay, and in that atmosphere, we have a 35 years old man sleeps with a 17 years old woman outside of marriage when she's his student. Who later faced criticism for this because of Heidegger's support for Nazi Party. So Ardent was also criticized for something she was doing when she was 17, because the person who was more than twice as old as her was supporting the Nazis. You can see how fucked up that is from the core of the gunk of the stuff, you know? So Ardent was criticizing for having a long romantic relationship when she was 17. Um, so they kept the relationship secret, preserving the details. So secret relationship can be something like Venus in, it can be Venus Pluto or Venus 12th house also. Um, blah blah blah. Relationship was not known until Elizabeth Young Brull's biography of Ardent. Wasn't she the other person he slept with? No. Blochmann. Biography of Ardent appeared in 1982. At the end of publishing, Ardent and Heidegger were deceased, and Heidegger's wife Elfriede was still alive. The affair was not widely known until 1995. Um, and okay, so what's interesting astrologically here is the Pluto Venus stuff. Um, his sun is Venus ruled, his sun is in Libra, and it also is a player in his health. So the psychosomatic stuff can't have to do with his view of the feminine or his view. Sun is it fall in Libra, which is Venus ruled. So there can be a yin yang discrepancy that affects also the heart condition, and from the worldview, there can be the abusive worldview, which of course is not good for Shen, for the heart, for the soul to reside in the body, and the Shen resides in the heart. It's the seat of the soul, and that can create a psychosomatic heart condition. So this is I feel like come back to my university days. Um, and so Pluto would play the Pluto Venus relation would play a part in his heart's health. Okay, a psychosomatic, so it's a psychological Pluto effect, and even a Pluto Venus can affect his health, and so we don't have to do the whole Capricorn Aries thing that I was doing earlier. So we get that psychosomatic from a Pluto afflicting the ruler of his sun. So, let's talk about his philosophy. Okay, let's philosophy. Let's talk about his philosophy. And I like that because this is an important episode beyond delineating and astrology. It's also tracking the thought pattern of someone who was also supportive of the Nazis and had really fucked up segments of his ideology or philosophy. And I want to read that. I want to read that philosophy without knowing at first what it is that was fucked up, to see what mistakes, for those of you who do not know Martin Heidegger, what mistakes are we going to make that the people did during the Nazi era? And what philosophical mistakes are we going to make when we're going to read? When you say, oh, this is true, oh, this is logical, oh, this is right, oh, this was a fundamental basis for the phenomenology and the ontology of Nazism. Okay, and what of that was what of his ideas was something that we can use today, and what of his ideas was something that was inverted. So let's do this. 1927. My course in YouTube Academia. I can actually do a course like that. Being in time, Heidegger rejected the Cartesian view of human being as a subjective spectator of objects. According to Marcella Horrigan Kelly, the book instead holds that both subject and object are inseparable. And again, and I was talking about his heart condition and how that plays out. Like you can't have a psychosomatic ailment and have hold the Cartesian view of the body-mind question, a dualistic view, i.e., mind does not affect the body. With the body-mind question, there is a joke that goes, "What is mind? What is mind? No matter. What is matter? Never mind." And that is a Cartesian view, and this is not compatible with having a psychosomatic ailment. So, being as inseparable, Heidegger introduced the term Dasein, being there, being in the world, being there literally translated, intended to embody living being through their activity and being there and being in the world, living being through their activities. This is a Martian notion of existence, and it does relate to the Aries part. In the Aries is a Martian, okay? It's an act. So for the card, it was thinking, but let's see where action relates here. Famously, Heidegger writes of Dasein and being in the world according to Michael Wheeler, 2011, understood as a unitary phenomenon rather than a contingent addictive combination. Being in the world is an essential characteristic of Dasein, Wheeler writes. Um, Heidegger's account of Dasein and being there in time passes through a dissection of experiences of Angst, the nothing. Angst is also anxiety in German, and mortality, and then through the analysis of the structure of care as such. Okay. From there raises the problem of authenticity, that is, the potentiality for moral Dasein to exist fully through that it might be actually understand and being might actually understand being and its possibilities. Dasein is not man, but something, but is nothing other than man, according to Heidegger. Wherever he wrote, the Dasein is being that will give access to the question of the meaning of being. So, the word understand in German is verstehen. Stehen is also to stay. So, to understand something, you need to stay with it. That which stays with something comes before that which understands something. And if that understanding is your own being, then you are before you understand that you are. Okay? And this is where Dasein is very logical. And you are is also an act. Your activity, your being in the world is there before you stay with you, and that staying yields an understanding of you. And that state of before you understand, before you think that you are, you are. And that is Dasein. You are in the world. And you are, it's not just you are who you are. No, materially, you are in the body. Okay? It's actually a very beautiful notion. You exist before you think you exist. You exist in the body, in the world. You just are. Okay, it's a big I am thing. So I would expect Aries to play a big role here, but this time not with the mind, but actually like what? Like if I did not know he has a Mars in Libra, I would expect a Mars in Aries here, and a Sol in Aries here, exalted Sol. Okay? Being the act of being is so much Sun in Aries, but he's not a Sun in Aries. Um, so this is something very exalted. I find this idea very exalted. Let's see how, like, am I fatalistically fundamentally mistaken? Is this some basis to Nazi ideology that I'm not aware of? Let's continue. Dasein's ordinary and even mundane experience of being in the world provides access to the meaning or sense of being, Sinn des Seins. Okay, so Sinn in the sense of sense, not sin, Sinn, uh, the sign, so the sense of being. Again, senses, so being, senses. Uh, yeah, senses is a Venusian thing, but it's not the Venus of Libra, it's the Venus of Taurus. Like, like he didn't have a Pluto in Taurus. Jung had a Pluto in Taurus or Gemini. Oh, Taurus, I think. I don't know. Or Freud had Pluto in Taurus. I don't think he had the Pluto. He was the German era. It was, or maybe he had the Pluto in Taurus. Yeah, maybe. So that would make it Pluto in Venus. And so just the presence of Pluto in Taurus already makes it, if you think about the sexual philosophy of Freud, who had, I think, Freud had Pluto in Taurus, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and his sexual philosophy was like, you know, like craving the penis of the father, being the daughter, or like the clitoris being masculine orgasm, and kind of like don't arouse the clitoris of a woman because it's masculine orgasm, it's not touching the yin essence of whatnot. Um so yeah, that's controlling the sexuality, because it's also in the sense of sublimation, but also controlling the sexuality and the senses. Yeah, it could also be tantric, in the sense of immersing into. But Pluto, there can be fear to do the tantric thing because Pluto is about control. But here's access to the meaning, access to the sense of being. So I don't know. This access via Dasein is also in terms. It seems like a bit of meditation. This Dasein, but not a mindful meditation, but a transcendental. I guess I don't know. It's like mindless, emptying the mind. This access via Dasein is also in terms of which something becomes intelligible as something. Exactly. Heidegger proposes that is meaning would elucidate ordinary pre-scientific understanding which precedes abstract ways of knowing such as logic or theory. Okay, so he wants to get at beyond language, if you get that, okay? If we do talk about Pluto in Gemini times, even if he was born in Pluto in Taurus, the zeitgeist was Pluto in Gemini, where he conceived his theories, during uh, the war, the pre Second World War. Um, and so he was trying to get at what happens before language. Before you conceive yourself logically, before you speak yourself into being or think yourself into being, what is the primordial sense of being? And this seems to me like a Pluto in Taurus person trying to do like during Pluto in Gemini times, creating a world for the being before language, which is important, if in psychoanalysis. Okay, getting access to your pre-verbal stage. Again, very deep thought. Like, I can see why people were affected by this thought. I can also see how that contributes something that the Cartesian and dualistic view of the body mind did not provide. This supposed the next phase, pro-linguistic precognitive access to the meaning of being did not underscore any particular preferred narrative, according to Count Richard Rorty's analysis of Edward Grippa. His account, Heidegger holds that no particular understanding of being nor state of Dasein and its endeavors is to be preferred over another. Again, very humanistic. Just state of being, just a being, babies born into the world. They just are. Isn't that beautiful? Moreover, Rorty agrees with Heidegger that there is no hidden power called being. Grieper writes, adding to Heidegger's concept of being is viewed by Rorty as metaphorical. No hidden power called being. I okay, but Heidegger actually offers no sense of how we might answer the question of being as such. Okay, how does being come into being? How does being in the world come into being? Okay. Answered question of what it means to be human. So it's more like an internal state of being. I think about. I rather not, no, because it's not necessarily the same. Nonetheless, Heidegger does present the concept being is not something like being, but is rather what determines beings as beings. So you are before you speak yourself into being. You are before you conceive yourself in terms of language. Your being is there before language. And I think, from a humanistic point of view, acknowledging that is very important. Even people who cannot speak are. They exist. They're autonomous. They have rights. But it's obviously not where he thought. So let's continue on. Each separately asserts that commentators' emphasis on the term being is misplaced, and Heidegger's central focus was never on being as such. So, Heidegger on concealment, concept of unconcealment was central, lifelong focused, um, brings about being as givenness of entities. Again, givenness of entities, okay, the existence of something. Heidegger claims that traditional ontology has prejudicially overlooked the question of being. Doesn't it look like a sun in Aries? Sun Mars? Because the master ruler of Aries, but it's like, yeah. So, and I am is also the sun. And the sun, having a heart condition, sun related issue means that is considered psychosomatic, you can't view your existence as separated body and mind. Okay, so different ontology. By just being you you just are, and you're dealing with this, the heart condition that people say is psychosomatic. So it's like, okay, then that means the philosophy that I was learning about being is not like there's something missing. It's a part of your being. The heart is also being, okay? Your heart functioning right is essential to your being, medically. Time. Heidegger believes that time finds its meaning in death, Saturnia. According to Michael Kelly, that time is understood only from a finite or mortal vantage Dasein, essential mode of being in the world, is temporal. Having time thrown into a word implies pastness into its being. So language already implies death. Mercury again, Mercury, Saturn. Dasein occupies itself, so this is another prediction, Mercury, Saturn. Language and death. Dasein occupies itself with the presence, tasks required by the goals it has projected to the world. And this is also tasks, goals. So Mercury, Mars, Saturn. Time, action. Can be even Saturn in Aries. When I say Mercury, Mars, Saturn, I say Mercury, Mars, Saturn, Capricorn, Aquarius, Aries, to some degree Scorpio, Gemini, to some degree Virgo. Okay, the signs that they rule. So it's those can be some of the predictions or the sets of the neural network, cosmic network that is activated with that. Heidegger concludes Dasein's fundamental characteristic is temporality, Kelly writes. So part of your being is that you're gonna die. Dasein is inseparable, subject-object cannot be separated from subjective historically. So being also has to do with history. This is already Sun Saturn. On the one hand, Dasein is stretched along being with birth and death and thrown into the world to its possibility. Dasein is charged with assuming. On the other hand, Dasein access to this world and these possibilities is always via history and tradition. This is the question of world historicality. Oh yeah, I need to read that again. Stretched along between the birth and death. Okay. Possibilities. Assuming. Oh, okay. It's like your being is on a time frame between your death and your birth, but your access to your being in the world and those possibilities that you have by being is through history and tradition, which is also Saturn governed. This is a question of world historicality. So we have a prominence of Saturn. This can again be, it can simply be Capricorn in the ninth, or Sun. Ontological difference and fundamental ontology. He drew a distinction between ontological and ontical, or being and being as such. What is ontical? Of that which is. Uh, Generalized dimension, which. Okay. Um, we have philosophy of science. I would need to look at this ontical thing. He labeled this as ontological differences between. It is from this distinction that he developed the concept of fundamental ontology. Great, I reached the central concept in his ideology, in his philosophy. Okay, let's go to ontological again. This is mental sport of the Saturn kind. Means what uh, that which concerns particular individuated beings rather than their modes of being. Okay, the present actual thing in relation to virtual generalized dimension. Is it like form in essence, which is physical, real, or factual existence? So ontic is form, form in the body, substantial, essential. It's form, it's substantial versus essential. That's what I get from here. I could be wrong. Um, why is there anything? Fundamental ontology. What does it mean for something to be? So, is fundamental relative to traditional ontology that it concerns what any understanding of entities necessarily presupposes, our understanding of that in the virtue of which entities are entities. Okay? It's very, fundamental being. Ontological inquiry, the basis of sciences, being and time. Okay. I don't see Nazism so far. So the ontology was project, fundamental ontology. Now let's see. The turn. And this is the change in his work in the 1930s that became clearly established in 1940s. I guess this is the questionable part. Heidegger rarely used the term Dicker. Recurring themes include poetry and technology. Poetry and technology, so Neptune, Uranus, Uranus in Pisces, I don't know. Commentators such as Richardson in 1963 describe a various shift to focus, a major change in outlook. But what change in outlook? 1935 clearly showed a shift, okay. To an emphasis on language from a previous emphasis on Dasein. So again, it can be the transition of Pluto from Taurus into Gemini. Okay, and that is what I see here. Um, in 90s, so he began, the Zeitgeist was the power of language, from the power of just being Taurus to the power of language. Um, covered by 30 years. Okay. Well, I would like to thank all the people who write this wonderful Wikipedia, for all the anonymous writers of all these Wikipedia terms that, so I'm very, very thankful for this endeavor and all the people who take part in it. So if anybody watches that, and if you can feed Wikipedia, then that would be a great donation. That also helps this project by including a shift in priority from being in time to time and being, namely from dwelling in the world to doing in the world, doing time, doing time. Mars, Saturn. This aspect in particular is being, dwelling, thinking, influenced architectural theorists including, okay, so that probably already has, the connection between the space and what you can do with that, or how you can be, how does the space affect your thinking. Again, not something I necessarily see as like Nazi related. Okay, the feng shui. Other interpreters can be overstated or that it even doesn't exist. Believes the supposed change is far less dramatic than usually suggested. Heidegger never focused on being, but rather tried to define being, that which brings being as a givenness of entities. Okay, we're still in the being thingy. Unconcealment, so what's the Nazi stuff? Okay, origin work of art, contribution to philosophy, a letter on humanism, building dwelling thinking, um, like all interesting stuff. The question of the all stuff I would need to read in German, because if I'll read it in English, I don't think I'll get to the root of it. In his later philosophy, Heidegger attempted to reconstruct history of being in order to show how different epochs of the history of philosophy were dominated by different conceptions of being. This is true. His goal, as part of what I was doing my thesis, his goal was to retrieve the original experience of being present in the early Greek thought that was covered up by later philosophers. That time of axiomatic mathematics, come on, why not Babylonian? Um, but then Telos and yeah, 1984 still is. Theoretical acceptance of destiny has much in common with the millenarianism of Marxism. Millenarianism? Theoretical acceptance is antagonistic to practical political activity and implies fascism. Acceptance of destiny. Oh, okay, so from telos, you can infer destiny, okay? Because there is a sense of determinism or karma, the Saturn, time. How is that antagonistic to practical? Like, it can be, you can use karma to justify horrible stuff, or you can see karma as the accumulation of actions. Um, Jill Spy, however, the real danger from Heidegger isn't quietism; it's about fanatism. History, as Heidegger understands it, doesn't move forward gradually, and regularly, but spasmodically and unpredictably. But it's true. It's true. Just because it's true. History moves in a nonlinear way. Look at astrology. Look at scientific revolutions. The structure of scientific revolutions is not just linear progress. We don't have the knowledge of the Mayas. We don't have the knowledge of ancient Egyptian cultures. It's a back to the, like literally my thesis title was titled Back to the Future Epistemic View on the Body Mind Question. And I was doing epistemics, but I also inferred ontology because I was looking at like epistemically how do we look at ontology. Not a Nazi. Modernity has cast mankind towards a new goal. On the brink of profound nihilism that is so alien it requires the construction of new tradition to make it comprehensible. What? Why is that nihilistic? It's cyclical. Yeah. Allen extrapolated from Heidegger's writing that mankind may degenerate into scientists and brutes. Pluto in Aquarius. He predicted something. According to Allen, Heidegger envisaged this abyss to be the greatest event in the West's history because it would enable humanity to comprehend being more profoundly and primordially than the pre-Socratic. Yeah, if you're dogmatic materialists, then okay. When I did an episode, I'm not sure I released about materialism, um, and that there is a sense of groundedness to materialism. Okay, it shuts off certain stuff that, if you think about dogmatic materialism in science, or scientific materialism, it is scientific materialism, and it was a post Second World War. So people had a shitload of trauma, and they were just shutting off certain facets of existence into matter, into this is all there is. And it, while spiritually nihilistic, supposedly you find a new appreciation for that, for matter, for being, for substantial. Okay, and you can also see the spiritual, the more, it's a movement between these forms of existences. Um, so those predictions are relevant to history. These supposed generation phases, if you think about, Kali Yuga, this Yuga, that Yuga, Iron Age, Golden Age, Bronze Age, and what is the silver? I don't know. And all those ages moving in cyclic, cyclic. Then you understand that there are cycles, and there. Um, he was just predicting. He was just being predictive here. Influences. Okay, so this is his influences. Aristotle, tremendous influence for him. The Age of Enlightenment. Um, Husserl's. We don't know. I'm skipping this part. Islam. Western philosophy and history and idea of ideas in Islam. Okay, which ideas in Islam? This is then focusing on the critique of history of metaphysics. See, rethinking or dwelling, Gestell. The technology part is something to look at. Confluence of Western and Eastern thought. Yeah, that was a time. That was the time back then. Influenced Iran. Ooh. It also claimed that the work of counter-enlightenment philosophers such as Heidegger, along with counter-enlightenment is a problematic definition, but I will not get into it in this episode. So I do need to do romanticism, I told you guys. With Friedrich Nietzsche and Joseph de Maistre influenced Shia Islamist scholars, notably Ali Shariati. So the clear impact of Heidegger in Iran is associated with thinkers such as Reza Davari Ardakhani, Ahmed Fadid, and Fadid's Jalal al-Ahmad, who have been closely associated with the unfolding of philosophical thinking in the Muslim modern theological legacy in Iran. So ever so relevant, right? Ever so relevant. We are not dealing with Irani Islamistic regime that experiences a revolt by women. So, frighteningly contemporary. This included the construction of ideology foundations of the Iranian revolutions. Okay, okay, ugh. But what were these ideas? I would have to make it a part one, and I will need to delve more into that, so that we can. This is 1:40 And I'm not going to look into the post-war because it's less interesting. And I'm going to open his chart. So this is 140. This is where the chart stuff begins. Let's see the predictions. So of course, oh yes, we have houses. Sun in the first house. Ah no, not first house. It's 11th house. Ascendant Jupiter ruled ascendants and Sagittarius. Jupiter in Sagittarius, 29 degrees Sagittarius. So very predictive. A ruler of ascendant, very predictive. Was predicting stuff. So Sun, we also have Moon in Libra, Moon with Uranus. Okay, I thought Moon with Uranus, the role of technology, and Uranus Chiron, relation also Moon square Chiron, Mercury also in Libra, Saturn with Venus. So Venus is afflicted by Saturn in the 10th house. No, wait, in the ninth house. Ninth house, Leo. So the ruler of the ninth in the 11th makes sense, but then Mars, so the ruler of the 12th in the 10th, so that's, and also a bit of like, it's in orb for conjunction with Venus, so there is an affliction here on Venus, so this is a borne out prediction that the ruler of the sun is afflicted. The sun itself is in good position in terms of aspects. Yeah, squares Jupiter. Yeah, I don't see that necessarily, but yeah, well, but the just the ruler of the sun being afflicted damages to health. So first house is Sagittarius, and his sixth house is Taurus, and so Taurus rules the sixth, and so the sixth is more the health issue. But because both the sixth house and Libra are Venus ruled, so we see it as so we can also see a heart condition because the sun is Venus ruled. So we can also have, okay, health related sixth house issues to do with the heart sun. And Mars is ruling the 12th. So Mars here in the 10th house in Virgo. Um, Mars is a square in Neptune, okay, but Mars is in orb to afflict Venus, and that means that Venus is applying to conjunct Mars, and she's separating from a conjunction with Saturn, or is on conjunction with Saturn. So Venus is very limited, okay, and Saturn is angst, anxiety, and Saturn is in Leo, so a sun-ruled sign. This is also happening in the ninth house. And Saturn, Venus, Saturn in the ninth house is traditional view, so view of time, view of history. Okay. Um, oh, Venus square Pluto. Like I said, Pluto affliction, another born out prediction. Pluto afflicts this Venus, hardly aspecting. No, Pluto square Venus is very intensely abusive unless a person can be victim of abuse um, unless um, dealt with correctly, dealt with maturely, which is not easily accessible. Pluto is in the seventh house, also abusive of seventh house relations. It's next to the descendant, and Pluto with Neptune, another lack of boundaries of power, and Pluto with Neptune there. So I did not have a good prediction about Pluto being in Taurus. This was not the case. It was the Venus stuff that was affecting, Venus in the ninth house, so sensual philosophy, basically senses philosophy. And yes, Pluto, it was a Pluto and Gemini generation, and so Pluto, writing about language or the power of language to affect psychology, and trying to get at the psychology beyond the primordial psychology, that which is beyond language or before language. The, and we have the square between the Pluto Neptune and Saturn. This Pluto Neptune conjunction, so idealization of power. That was the context of the time. And again, I don't know what was his contribution to Nazi ideology. Um, um, yes, that is something that is evident. So Rahu is you. Rahu is in Capricorn. Rahu is Saturn ruled in the second house. Okay. Ketu in the eighth house with Lilith. Um, Ketu squaring Sun, so Sun squaring Ketu. This means Sun squaring the nodes. I don't know why it's not shown here. Lilith squaring Sun, again harshly aspected Lilith with Ketu and the Sun, gives us a person who had stuff with his sexuality. Okay, in this case, unfortunately, it was abusive stuff. With the women that he was having sexual relationships with. Um, and then we see, the ruler of the ninth here. Venus in the ninth with Saturn can actually give long term relationships. And those were only affairs because of this Pluto thing, that the Pluto Neptune, it gives us abusive, that gives us. Other than that, he could have actually married a student, okay, or married a teacher, a female teacher. With Venus in the ninth house means you can meet a spouse in the ninth house. Mercury here is in Libra. In the 11th, actually quite a strong Mercury, sextile in Venus, sextile in Rahu and Jupiter, sextile in Jupiter. This is strong Mercury, Mercury in Libra. Yeah, I don't see anything particularly wrong with it. It's also, well, it's not on speaker, but it's not too far either. So he was a good orator. Yes, unfortunately, the combination of being intensely abusive and good communicator is horrible, to say the least. Um, but also his Jupiter is finely aspected, so his worldview was not askew. It was not his worldview that was askew with Jupiter. But with the ninth house, we already have a problem. So the part of his philosophy from the ninth house, so his Jupiter is not askew, but the high mind is not askew, but the philosophy here does tend, with Saturn, Neptune, it can tend to fundamentalism, I think. It can tend to um, idealizing power or great structures. And he was thinking, very, very big, in the big picture, thinking of, eras and ages and kind of very solar thinking and the structure of time and thinking about time and sensing time. Okay, there's Venus, Sun, Saturn, and Mercury and Mars. So I predicted a lot of things that we do see in the chart. So the wrong prediction was basically about Pluto being beginning in Taurus. This is not true. He was a Pluto in Gemini generation. Um, what other predictions I made that were wrong? I don't remember, but quite a lot of right predictions that surprise even me. A philosophy of technology, again, we have, well, philosophy of technology, this is interesting, because this moon is with Uranus. It also means something unusual about the mother. Like I said, the name, Kempf, 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 it's not Catholic, huh? Something unusual about the mother, you know? Um, but I don't know for sure. So Mercury ruled the midheaven. I don't think, did I make prediction about the midheaven? Maybe with Neptune, so that was wrong. Neptune's in the seventh, around the descendant with Pluto. Yes, this is it. Okay, for the synastry, so he brings Pluto to my Rahu. So he brings Pluto to my Rahu. Um, okay, it definitely someone that I would have to study more. Saturn and Venus to my sixth house, Mars to my seventh, my eighth, the Sun to my eighth house, Moon and Uranus to my eighth, Mercury to my eighth, um, Jupiter to my 10th, Ketu to my fifth, Rahu to my 11th, and again the Sun is now the Sun is right about his Rahu right now as I'm filming the Sun in Capricorn. With quite a bit of a stellium we have in Capricorn. Um, yeah, I don't have anything in particular in that. Do I? Yes, I have. No, I have Jupiter in 12 degrees Capricorn. It's not there. I have. Yeah, no, it's not. Jupiter is conjuncting, well, sort of kind of my midheaven and my Neptune. Okay, so it's teaching, so to do with my midheaven, my Neptune. I'll need to look into that. Um, am I biased by him? No, no, not in particular. Yeah, it's not making any, like harsh aspects into something. Well, Pluto Neptune opposes my will, but it's next to Rahu, so it opposes my cat. Not something relevant, so I don't think I'm particularly biased by him. I don't idealize him. I think, right? Nothing in my chart that could signify my Mercury is not in his zone. My moon is right between his planets, so it's not touching my sun in Taurus. So again, not problematic, and not harshly aspecting his Mars or Saturn. Um, Also, yeah. So it's like I think his Uranus is opposing my Mercury. Like not really opposing my Mercury, separating from this, but this Uranus Mercury. It could have unpredictable, like I'm talking about him unpredictably, or he could, like, studying about him could affect or revolutionize my thinking in a way. So this is useful. I should learn more about him. Um, yes. Oh, because his Jupiter is next to my Neptune, so I might idealize a bit his worldview. I need to look the content of his teaching. I might idealize a bit, but not idealize him. Okay, so I'm able to see him clearly. It's just that his worldview, his philosophy, I might idealize. Also, Neptune is not too far from my Rahu. I might idealize his philosophy. This is important. So it's very important for me to learn about him because I need to understand what in his philosophy is wrong, so that we don't repeat the same cycles. Huh? So that was a very fascinating episode, and I will wish you good night. It's Yeah, it's midnight. It's midnight, and my carriage is turning into pumpkin, and my crystal shoes are turning into dust and stardust, and I am a sleeping beauty who needs to do its night oil pulling and leave you alone. And I'll see you in my next episode. Bye bye. Okay, subscribe, donate, Patreon. not patriots, and yeah.